happened to a janitor named George at the time of this story, and this was back sometime in 2017 in the summer. School was just not far from from then, and of course, it was just because school was off for the summer and there was no students, so the janitors had to come back to school at least a week before school started, so then that way they can have time to get everything cleaned up and ready for the teachers and students. However, for George ended up having to be instructed by one of the janitors. The other ones have requested him to go down to the storage room, and in other words, to grab a couple of extra brooms and mops, as their other ones have gone missing for some reason. At that point, George agreed and took the elevator there down to the ground floor of the room. Of course, it was a very old basement. It looked like nobody had been there for years, as it was a big mess in the bottom of the basement. He ended up going towards where the brooms and mops are, but as he was doing that, he heard what seemed to be like a slight chuckle from a kid. It sounded like the kid was a woman, but sounded like she was maybe 15 or 16. Wait a minute, George thought. How would there be somebody or a student in downstairs in the basement when they know that the basement was off limits to the public? George ended up walking around the basement, even though the lights was on to illuminate what was in front of him and stuff. He couldn't find whoever it was, so he thought it might have been maybe some prank. Maybe it might have been one of the janitors trying to scare him or something. He said, "Okay, this isn't funny. Come on out," he said. But there was no answer. This was starting to get strange, so George ended up grabbing the extra cleaning supplies and putting them into his cart where he was going to use them to take them back upstairs. But when he walked over, he could see that there was someone over there. It looked like a woman. She looked 13 or maybe slightly older. She looked around between 13 and 16, but he's never seen her before, and he doesn't think he's ever seen her, so he said, "Excuse me, ma'am, you're not supposed to be in the basement," George said, but the young child didn't seem to speak. All this person could do was just stare at George. This was starting to get creepy as George was about to make his way over to her and say, "I could take you back upstairs, but you can't come down here again. Is that understood?" he said. But the woman ended up looking at him and let out a laugh. But this was when George ended up beating out of it. He grabbed the cart with stuff, grabbed everything he could carry, and ran back upstairs to the elevator. He then got back on the elevator and ended up taking the elevator back up to the stairs. When he got back up there, he went to see the other janitors, and they asked him if he was okay. But George said he saw someone outside, and of course it was in the basement, and he looked really furious. And this was when the janitors, the other ones, had went down to check. But when they went down to check on him, or what was in the basement that he saw, they couldn't find anybody there. All they could hear was laughter of a woman and even, well, footsteps. They still can't find this woman or whoever was in the basement. But if George goes down the basement, he was always with someone. And what he think that he might have came across on that day was probably paranormal. He has not been down in the basement by himself again, but if he were to go down there, he was always with someone. But he still doesn't know if they're still down there to this day, but he never saw that woman again. When I was around maybe 22 years old, this was really strange, came across it, but my mom and I were walking around on a trail with our dog. Now, my dog Bear at the time of the story was a really cute little bear. He was really smiling and really cute, but he was also a little bit of I guess you could say high maintenance, as he had been through a lot of issues like epilepsy, pancreatitis, and etc. But he was a very sweet dog. Now, my mom and I decided to go up on a trail that wasn't far from, the town we lived in. It was about maybe a 10-minute drive, depending on the traffic, but it's usually a 5-minute one. So we went on this one trail that was private property, which we found out till later, but that's going to be more important in the story. We saw a trail that we never seen before, so we decided to go up the trail with our dog. As we were walking up there, it was, of course, cloudy and was about to rain soon, but we could see the beautiful fall colors. All the leaves were changing from green to all the way to yellow, bright yellow, yellowish green, orange, and red, and even falling down from the tree was absolutely amazing. Especially if you're going up north or living up there, you will be able to see more colors of the leaves. As we were walking through the forest, we saw what seemed to be a tractor. But the weirdest thing was that nobody was in the tractor. My mom and I got a closer look and found out it hadn't been used in a few days. Maybe somebody was actually there and probably was making some work, but we didn't see anybody, so we continued. We continued up to go up the path, and it was beautiful and really amazing, and it was really nice having not to see just city after city or building after building for that matter. You could just look up and see a whole bunch of stuff. However, when I got closer to what it was, I looked up to see that there was a house. There was a house that looked like a cabin in the woods, and my mom was quite nervous and thinks that we shouldn't be there. However, I was curious, so I decided to go up and see. I walked up to the house, and it was a cabin. It looked abandoned, but from the inside it looked like it, as there was barely any furniture left in it, but on the outside it looked kept and nice. I ended up telling her just to hold on the bear while I go check. I went over to check on what it was, but however, when I got over there, I walked around inside the house. Luckily, the door was unlocked and I didn't have to climb through a window. There was some broken glass shards that were on the ground. Probably some kids were probably messing around and broke through the glass, but whatever. I ended up looking around the place, and it looked really dusty. There was a living room, a simple kitchen, and even a little sitting area. Nothing much was going on, but I walked over to what it was and ended up saying, "Hello? Anyone there?" I called, but there was no answer, and this was starting to get very strange by the minute. It was definitely weird as nobody was there, but I thought maybe someone was there. I ended up looking around the cabin, but however, I looked to see that there was a person. It looked like a man. He looked like he was in his 50s or something, but he was completely white, and I ended up looking around. I said, excuse me, do you own this place?" I said. Suddenly what this man did, he just faded away. He didn't even say anything. He just faded away and disappeared. I ended up calling, "Hey, come back here," I said. All of a sudden, I heard what seemed to be a ghostly shriek, so I ran out of the cabin and went back to my mom, which was a couple feet away from the cabin. I told her that someone was in there and we had to get out of here. So we went all the way back. Of course, we ran for a bit until we could no longer see the cabin, and we walked back to our van. When we got back home, we ended up deciding and trying to figure out who or what was in that house. However, we didn't call the police or anything, as we were trespassing. As Mom said, there was a no trespassing sign, which we didn't see that until we were exiting out of the woods. If we did call the police and they found out we were trespassing and it was on the private property area, we could have been in major trouble. But thank the Lord, no one was ever there, and nothing has ever happened since. I still wonder to this day if this ghost man was still there. Well, regardless, I never saw him again. Well, I don't know if this was paranormal or not, or if I'm seeing things, but I don't want to return to that house to find out. So this happened to one of my friends back in high school, and she was having fears of paranoia, thinking that there would be somebody in her room, probably watching her sleep. Why she had this paranoia thing was because when she was around maybe 16, she ended up having to see someone broke into her house, and it was someone that she'd never seen before. Now since then, She had been only alone with her sister, or her parents' home for that matter. I don't know what it was, but something was really strange about this one girl. Let's call her Morgan for the sake of the story. Morgan was a very paranoid girl, and she gets really paranoid when it comes to seeing someone she doesn't know. However, she was home alone one night when she saw something. Now, just to make it clear, she was home alone as both her parents were out on vacation in the summertime, and her brothers were at a summer camp, so she had the whole house to herself. Her cats were just chilling around, just lying down, being lazy as usual. Something happened though that made Morgan's skin crawl. She was falling asleep as well after she's been on Facebook talking to some of her friends. She fell asleep, but then something was really strange began to happen. I honestly don't know what to do or what to believe in, but it was really strange. As Morgan was falling asleep, she looked up and jolted up to see that there was a woman. But how would there be someone in there? The woman looked very old, maybe in her mid-70s, and she was not pleasant. Morgan didn't know what to do. She was honestly scared to move, thinking the woman would just come after her. But she'd never seen that woman before, and her house had been locked up, so she didn't have to worry about it. Now, Morgan tried to go back to sleep, but the woman ended up disappearing when she woke up again after a few minutes of closing her eyes. She thought that maybe it might have been some hallucination, so she tried to fall asleep again. However, probably around 3 in the morning, she woke up to see the woman was actually standing right there in front of her bed. She ended up screaming and ended up running out, but as she ran past what seemed to be the woman, she called the police, but when the police arrived, the woman was not there. I don't condense about what this woman had planned, but Morgan ended up being really scared that she ended up sleeping in her parents' bedroom as she was scared about this woman being in there. Now, when her parents and everyone returned, she didn't tell anybody about this woman, as she's afraid that nobody would believe in her. Now, Morgan has not seen that woman for about 2 years now, and she's glad it's staying that way, and she just hopes it does. I'm not sure if this was maybe some sick prank or not, but this woman had definitely looked really old and weak, is from what Morgan could describe it as. Morgan is not sure if this woman was ever had a intent to do it or not, do anything. But of course Morgan thought maybe she was hallucinating, or maybe it was paranormal. As the police never found the woman, I am certain it was paranormal. But Morgan has not seen this woman since then. But it was pretty freaky experience to say the least.